Well, welcome. Aloha, I don't know if you were going to do any introduction or should I go ahead and just get started?
Yeah, please, John. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
So welcome to the session. Today we're going to discuss, we've got a great panel of speakers on how blockchain is going to provide a level playing field for Africa and financial inclusion for millions of Africans. So I will be starting it off and talking about kind of just a little introduction on some of the things that are happening with blockchain now and how that might affect Africa and the diaspora. And then Deidre McIntyre will be speaking about how, from the African-American perspective, and how we really connect those things. Dr. Jones will be talking about how Africa is ready for blockchain on the continent. And Ian Molina, who's really very well known in the crypto space as well, will be talking about how blockchain is an investment vehicle and finding the best ways to invest in this space. So we will be going through that at the end. We're going to have about 20 minutes for people to ask questions. You can put them in the chat, or you can put them just audio. You can raise your hand, I think, and you should be able to go ahead and ask your questions, and we'll try to field those. And we're recording the session, Aloha, correct? So people will be able to watch this later as well. Welcome, Emmanuel, French to English interpreter. Thank you, Emmanuel. How are you going to do it, Emmanuel? Are you going to just do it real time while we're speaking, or how will you do the interpreting?
Okay, I'm going to interpret simultaneously as the session is going on.
Great. Okay, so I'll try to speak more slowly. You have to slow me down if you need to, because I talk fast. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. We'll let people continue to join here as we go. So I'm going to begin an introduction here. Can everybody see my screen? Is that okay? Good. Okay, so what we see here is these are just some African crypto projects. There are many. Odua Coin is there on the left. There's Acoin, which is pretty famous from Acon. Stellar is not African owned, but it is doing a lot on the continent, as is Cardano. And then, of course, Bitcoin, kind of the king of all the coins. And there are stablecoin projects, which are, you'll hear about those probably a bit later, like the Nigerian central bank digital currency and others across the continent. So a lot of different cryptocurrency and digital asset projects that are taking place all across Africa. Some are African owned, some are focused on Africa, but we're going to talk about those and some others associated with that. So why is it a big deal for the developing world? Well, we know that for most of the developed world, everybody's got pretty easy access to bank accounts, to loans, to business capital, but that's not true in the developing world. In the developing world, in Africa, of course, it's very hard to get that capital, or very hard to get a good interest rate, or get access to liquidity of funds. So what cryptocurrencies do is they allow for that access where it was previously not possible. Sorry, I'm going to let the translator jump in. You want to translate? Emmanuel?
Okay, it's Adib Victor is interpreting from English to French. I'm doing French to English.
Yeah, John, the participants can switch between channels if they click on the interpretation tab down there. So you don't need to pause.
I don't need to pause. Okay, great.
Yeah,
okay, so places like Zimbabwe, what you see is that
Zimbabwe.
I do need to pause. the Bitcoin.
Oh, désolé. Is it Mr. Degwite that is disturbing you?
Do I need to pause or I don't need to pause?
No, you continue. Just continue.
No, no. It's automatically enabled. Emmanuel, I'm assigning you now for the interpretation from English.
I think
French
Emmanuel, whenever they are speaking English, he doesn't need to interpret anything. He will interpret whenever they speak in French, so that we just interpret for the audience who doesn't understand the French.
Okay.
Sorry,
so for Zimbabwe, for instance, they've been moving towards Bitcoin, Nigeria's central bank digital currency, and the transparency also makes it much easier to transact, where we don't need to be worried about, was this a legitimate transaction? Did the funds go where we expected them to go? The entire blockchain is visible basically publicly. So there is a lot of benefit for Africa, for diaspora, and the ability to transact using the blockchain in these ways. I'm not going to play this, but what this does go through is in South Africa, CNBC did a report some time ago, where they talked about how easy it was for people for Zimbabwe working in South Africa, for instance, to use crypto if they wanted to send funds home, versus the difficulty of being able to send funds other ways, like I think they call it the money bus or whatever it was, that they would, have a bus driver send the funds to their family. So they talk about how much easier it became, as crypto is actually something that makes a really big difference for the continent, for South Africa, across the continent, where in the US, in Europe, it might be convenient, it might be an investment class, it might be fun to play with. But for Africa, this is something that makes a big difference for people's daily lives, and just the ability to have access to funds and maybe life-saving funds and assets. So how does it affect African diaspora? Opportunities for economic inclusion and empowerment, which Deidre will talk about more, and I'm sure we'll have other discussion as well. Connecting African diaspora and the African continent, because it's very hard to transact. I'm Nigerian on my father's side, and anytime we need to send funds between our family and in the US, very difficult, not easy to do, right? It's very hard to get funds movement. This makes a big change. Many blockchain projects, businesses, other opportunities. So this is like a new .com boom. For those of you who remember the 2000, there was a big .com boom. You had Facebook and Google come out of that. This is like the next round of that. But this is probably going to be bigger because it's global. It's not just America, it's not just Silicon Valley. So there's a very big opportunity for Africa to leapfrog and jump ahead. And networking, creating global communities, very key. We want connections all across African diaspora, Africa, and the continent, and creating a digital Wakanda is a little something that I work on. That's something called the Wakanda Blockchain Meetup, which is meant to connect us across the continents. So banking the unbanked, and you're going to get a little more, I think Dr. Jones will touch about the access to kind of, connectivity and things like that. But we can see that Africa, across the entire map, we have the most unbanked, especially sub-Saharan Africa, right? So crypto and Bitcoin and digital assets have the potential to open this up, where that 80% of sub-Saharan Africa is unbanked. If they have access to a cellular phone, if they have access to any connection of any kind, they can become part of the financial community, right? They can do transactions. They can now become banked, at least in this finance 2.0 perspective, which is a great opportunity for Africa, for the continent, and for the diaspora as well. After that, this is my company, Auspicious Blockchain. This is something that we facilitate, is doing crowdfunding, investing from the diaspora into Africa, allowing the ability to invest in the continent. Just like a generation ago, China had a lot of diaspora invest back in China. We now want to also see a lot of Africa's diaspora, whether African American, African Latino, in the Caribbean, Europe, investing and being able to connect back to support projects across the continent, whether it be mining or farming or any different area across the continent. So our platform, I'll leave details about that a little bit later, so you can take a look at that. I will not play the video, but that's our goal and our mission, is to be able to enable that type of investment from the diaspora into Africa, and to build wealth for the diaspora and Africa in the process. I'm going to move past that, so give me a second. And let's go on. This is my contact information, so if you need to reach me, I'll put most of this in the chat as well while Deidre is going on, but I'll leave it up here for a second. And Deidre, I believe your slides are next. So as I get ready to put this into the chat, Deidre, let me go ahead and hand it over to you. Are you ready to go?
Yes, as long as you can run the slides on your end of
Yes.
my presentation, I'll tell you when to switch. Thank you for inviting me to share a little bit of insight on the African American perspective on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. My name is Deidre McIntyre, and I'm the founder of Black People in Cryptocurrency, which is primarily an education and media vehicle to kind of get not just African Americans. If you notice, we kind of use the Pan-African colors, but to kind of connect between the African American and Caribbean and African communities, because we share something in common, which is the difficulty, as John mentioned, of being able to send remittance and do actual, business across borders. We're kind of always left with the highest remittance rates and just overall difficulties. But my perspective is to give you insight on African Americans. Next slide, please. Our personal story, I'm not going to go through all of this in verbatim, but essentially I became aware of cryptocurrency in 2016 after there was an article that one of the founders of PayPal was donating a tremendous amount of millions of dollars to our former president's campaign. And that is basically a sore spot for a lot of African Americans in the community, just due to the kind of racial overtones of the previous administration. And so it got us thinking, we can't catch a break here in the United States. What kind of technology can African Americans use to be able to send money or to do merchant services that doesn't involve someone that's supporting the far right? And kind of fostering a kind of climate that basically risks our lives. So one of the people within my network, who's actually a fellow member of my group, Bob Ponce, was like, well, you need to look at Bitcoin. And that kind of set the ball rolling for studies in 2016. We ended up linking with a venture capitalist who has since passed. And he says, yeah, I've been getting a lot of queries about this Bitcoin thing. I don't know it either. I'm the journalist, so they kind of all turned to me and dumped a bunch of website links, TED Talks, everything on me. And it was like, write something up and make it plain. And so that from 2016 was all setting. By the time we got to fall of 2017, I was noticing there were a lot of multi-level marketing entities that were targeting Africa, the Caribbean, and African Americans under this guise of, paying monthly and we'll get the Bitcoin for you. And I already knew that's not how that worked. You could have had $5, you could have had, $10, you could have did it completely on your own, And so it was like, okay, let's start a group that really started education on the fundamentals. And then let's also let them know that at that time in 2017, there were about 400 cryptocurrencies. And to give perspective, now there's probably more than 15,000 cryptocurrencies. So it's a fast growing field. By 2019, I was a little bit dismayed that more of the Black people that were in the space that had startups or considered themselves professionals were not getting the media attention. They were not getting the media attention in the crypto news outlets nor the mainstream. And so I put a list together that basically said there were more than 125 people that we had randomly found. And it didn't mean I met them personally, but just scouring websites, scouring YouTube, scouring Google, and we were just finding person after person after person that had quite a bit of history, years of history and writing things. So we put that list out there to kind of put it in the face that we're not invisible, that we are in space. Now fast forward to 2020 is that when you have the first African-led, Kenyan-led specifically, proof of work blockchain, and that's the WIVE protocol. And John Karanja, who's head of GitHub Africa, many of you may know, is the lead engineer behind that. And that's monumental for us as African Americans because it goes back to our 2016 premise. What is something that we could use that we have a better shot that it is not a racist giving funds to, primarily people who support and go to, racist factions, or just kind of dismiss the fact that it's ancillary to lower taxes or lower fees that, racism, Black people just have to deal with it. So WIVE is something that, because they launched that blockchain, that we know that in the future, there's a place for us to build upon that hopefully is more in tune with our livelihood. Next slide. We do a lot of writing intermittently and also a lot of different live streams. This is some screenshots of some live streams that we've done with the actor and writer Erica Alexander. She had an NFT line, and then of course that's John Karanja. We did a one-on-one, and Bob Ponce, who's the other person there. That's the other person that was the one person in my network that knew Bitcoin before me and was throwing me all these links to kind of catch up in 2016. We've also appeared in a number of conferences, and because I'm more of an editorial journalist, I attend a number of op-eds and features in the sector. Next slide. We assist and partner with a couple of people in the space. Every single person on here has been in the space longer than I have. Of course, I mentioned John before with Wive. Eduardo Jackson actually has the oldest African-American blog in the space called Blacks in Bitcoin, but his real project was to create a Hollywood predictions game. So if anybody's into fantasy sports and trying to come up with a team that measures the stats, et cetera, whether it's American football or global football, he just does it with Hollywood films. So he has a cryptocurrency that he just launched in this past October that's tethered to the game that he's been working on for the past 6 years. And of course, kind of the mecca for us is the Black Blockchain Summit by Sinclair Skinner of the I Love Black People movement. This is the oldest conference, having launched in 2018, and it's kind of where I met John and a whole bunch of people face to face. And so that's kind of the brands that we kind of work the closest with, but we're pretty much open to working with a lot of different people. Next slide. There's a lot of data. I don't want to go too heavily into a lot of the data that surrounds African Americans. We study quite a bit. This was more of a general people of color one that University of Chicago organization created very recently in June of this year, and they said that 44% of cryptocurrency buyers are Americans of color. So that, of course, 11% of that number was Black people, and only 35% of the respondents said they only did stocks only. So it's kind of like a turning tide in the United States. Next slide. A little bit more data. You could probably read and go through this at a later date, but essentially what it's saying is that African Americans are basically somewhat abused. Well, not somewhat. They're abused by the current financial situation. We have a tendency to, pay more in terms of banking fees and as it relates to our mortgages, et cetera. But on the reverse side, we have a tendency to give more money to our family members and friends who are in need than as compared to any other demographic. And it's compared to at least white families and Latinx families. And those are the two compared to not necessarily Asian or Native Americans, but we were more likely to help friends and families who are in financial distress. But we're also more likely to be abused by, in terms of fees and other issues by the banking institution. And that kind of all sets the stage as to why cryptocurrency is viewed positively by African Americans as kind of like at least another option and help us for building family wealth. Next slide. Okay, so some of the ways in which African Americans participate into the space, holding I think is most common. So that's the idea of targeting it mostly on Bitcoin, which is kind of a sound strategy, and then just buying and holding and then just getting it there and then seeing how it's growth. A lot of times online, you see people talking about speculating and jumping on coins and I made all this money, but we kind of, I think a lot of us realize that a lot of that is online marketers. So a lot of what you see in social media, Twitter, Facebook and stuff is not necessarily what the average everyday person was doing. We actually had a small poll within group about a year ago, and it was interesting to see that most people came forward and said that they were actually holding compared to the noise that was in the space. A deal is to invest in wealth for future generations. We also are very conscious about building custom financial solutions, and this idea that not only as individuals are we victimized by the banking system, but we also have a situation with farmers losing land in the United States. So in the 1920s, and that was on that last slide as well. In the 1920s, Black farmers had, there were about 1 million farmers, and now 11 million farmers, and now it's like extremely small, it's like 1% of America's farmers are farmers. They're basically losing land to the bank. So this idea of being able to provide an economic base for us to continue to grow and to actually reclaim some of the land that we lost, and building businesses internationally and internally as well. Looking, you know, a lot of times we have very difficult means in getting merchant services and other, even using PayPal and Stripe doesn't help us facilitate any e-commerce in the Caribbean or Africa. So this idea that there's this platform that we could build something and have that commerce between regions is very important to the African American community. Next slide. Okay, this is my contact information. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of insight on the African American experience. And if you have any further questions, you absolutely can reach out to me and then I can be more specific. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidre. And I'm going to go over to Dr. Jones.
All right, thank you very much, John. Right, so I think you can hear me loud and clear. Great. There's quite a lot of talk and interest in the blockchain and the cryptos in Africa. But going back a little bit, it's worth looking at some of the underlying factors that have led to the growth of related sectors, for example, financial technology and so on. And today I'm going just to focus a little bit on why Africa is actually in a very good place when it comes to the adoption and the increase in blockchain and also crypto activities. So first of all, Africa is a region of opportunity for financial technology. And this one, I'm going to call it Fintech. There's been a lot of investments in the Fintech area in Africa over time due to its unique economic and demographic environment. Of course, we've heard very emphatically that Africa is characterized by a less developed financial infrastructure and primarily also by an unbanked population, about 60%. So access to financial services to the population has often been hampered. Now here comes now new technology to help improve this. And for this, we shall look at what most people know as the fintechs, the technology that's driving financial services. So the content has already proven its readiness for fintech. It has one of the highest mobile phone penetration levels in the world. Now, we find that in some countries, it's more than 90% mobile phone penetration. In fact, in some, for example, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, and so on, you find that the number of mobile phones really per household is at least 2.5, 2 to 3 mobile phones per household. Now, that is really, really, really high. Now, currently, this fact that the mobile phone technology has really created the environment where there's a fintech, what I call a fintech revolution in Africa. And this fintech revolution, we shall see later on, is fueled mainly from 3 main hubs within Africa. So the Southern Africa side, South Africa, we have the East Africa led by Kenya, and then you have the West Africa side led by Nigeria. Now, even though in the Sub-Saharan Africa, it is accelerating steadily, well, in a region with a large number of unbanked citizens and a number of underdeveloped financial sector, fintechs are offering a revolution to boost the Southern African infrastructure. So we find that the sub-Saharan Africa region is created a condition of growth promising. And this is where now the blockchains and the cryptos are really riding the wave on. The growth potential of expanding specifically the payment sector is emphasized by the expectation that there'll be a total number of close to 1 billion mobile phone connections by 2034. That's amazing. 1 billion mobile connections by 2034. Now, if you look at this, this is a tremendous amount of growth. And if you extrapolate it closely to even up to 2054, we find that the population of Africa is going to be close to 1.3 billion. So if you look at that, there's tremendous amount of opportunities in this space. Next slide, please, John. Overall, the fintech landscape, we can divide into two groups. Those mainly that are providing financial services, what we call the core fintechs, and those that enable the provision of such financial services, and we call them the enabling fintechs. And you see these ones a lot in a very interesting proportion in the sub-Saharan Africa. The core fintechs are arranged in 7 distinct segments. I'll not look at all the segments together today, but the focus is on the delivery of financial solutions and services to both citizens, individuals, and also businesses. So the enabling fintechs, on the other hand, are separated now into 3 segments and enable other business to provide financial services through an array of different channels. And you'll find that this is a specific area that the crypto is really now coming into within the African region. Next slide, please, John. The fintechs have gained, they have gained a widespread attention and have disrupted the financial sector across both the developing and the developed countries. Due to the low coverage of traditional financial services in Africa, the fintech sector has significantly grown over the past decade. There are close to 1,000 plus active fintechs in the African continent. 80% of those are actually of domestic origin. The majority of enabling fintechs are also closely tied to payments. So you find that there's a lot of activity in the payment sector. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of talk later on the blockchain and cryptos in this space. So this payment sector, they establish payments infrastructure in the region and thus further amplify the segment's leading position. The fintech sector in the sub-Saharan Africa comprises of 260 active companies. They're split mainly into local 80% and 20% of these are international players. The number of fintechs here, they have grown really, and are growing at a rate of about 24% over the past 10 years. So already you can see this is a very rich environment for the growth of further innovation in this space. So like the fintech sectors in more developed markets, the payment segment is the most dominant in the sub-Saharan Africa, mainly due to the large and banked population, and also correlating high demand for financial inclusion. The high concentration of mobile phones in sub-Saharan Africa has also aided this growth. So the persistent need for financial inclusion will continue to drive the growth of this payment segment. The payments such as banking, lending are also growing rapidly, and new ones such as within the insurance sector are also emerging. With the right amount of resources and support, I'm sure the sub-Saharan Africa sector is likely to really yield substantial returns going forward. So this is an area to watch very, very closely. So John, the next slide, please.
I'm not sure if they're in the right order. Is this the correct one?
Just go to the next one. Yeah, stop there. That's fine. So the three main fintech hubs in Africa, we've talked about, we've seen centers in the South, East, and West Africa. And these areas have been led by three countries, South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, respectively. We've seen that the Southern African fintechs are predominantly located around Cape Town, Johannesburg, and so on. Arguably, this is the epicenter of fintechs, actually, in the sub-Saharan Africa. So South Africa harbors about a third of all firms that participate in this ecosystem. As the most diversified hub, it exhibits greater similarities to the more developed markets. Its focus is strategically placed on the enabling sector, the enabling financial technology segments, making the country one of the main contributors of growth of fintech across the continent. Then you also see within East Africa, led by Kenya. Kenya is the second largest fintech hub. It hosts around 20% of the entire fintech landscape and has a stronger focus on the payments segment. So the Kenyan hub, which is located in Nairobi, is home to close to about 50 fintechs, and it's really increasing here. And then Nigeria fintech sector is the third largest hub, and it's growing rapidly, very, very rapidly at the moment. Most of its fintech is based in Lagos, and like Kenya, the Nigerian fintech sector is dominated by payment segment. So you also see a trend following within the blockchain and crypto in this space too. So the trends have shown that the focus of fintechs here is on the needs of the retail sector. So the three main hubs distinguish themselves from the rest of Africa through their relatively more advanced fintech ecosystems. And consequently, it's relevant harbors of also investment opportunities. So those two are very important driving factors. And again, it's closely to what I call the mobile technology belt that is cutting across Africa from the south to the central, east and central Africa, going all the way to the West African region. So in addition of this, there's so many other developments in other African countries. We've seen Ghana, we've had what is going on in Uganda, Cameroon, Rwanda, and so on. So there's a lot of activity here. And again, it's a very common to see where this growth is relatively follows the technology and the scaling of increase in the mobile space in these countries. So given the increasing interest in the fintech segment, it is expected that the fintech ecosystem will further improve across more countries in Africa in the near future. And we are seeing it today. And a lot of it is driven by now the new interest in blockchain technology. So overall, Africa, I can say, is very, very well primed, is well primed for blockchain technology. Really, the facts and the figures explain it. We've seen the mobile technology penetration, we've seen the internet penetration, we've seen also education and a lot of mindset change that is happening in Africa at the moment that is really fueling and making it a very, very important space for growth going forward. So there's a lot to say actually in this area, but I'll not go too much into the details. I've presented a little bit about the figures, about some of the what is happening in the sister space, which is a fintech space, and which has consistently led to the growth of blockchain and crypto activity. And I'll just say that I'm very excited myself, also as a player participating in this ecosystem through the Mindflix Media platform, which we set up primarily to provide an opportunity for we to begin to learn through intelligence to education within the space in Africa specifically. So Mindflix Media is a platform that we have really coined or set up during this pandemic period to increase the knowledge, to provide opportunities for the local entrepreneurs in Africa and also the diaspora investors to really come together and raise funds. So we do facilitate the raising of funds and then infusing IT resources so that we spur a bit of economic activity and get projects going. So this is really, really an area that we are passionate about, and I'm sure all of us here are interested to see or hear what is coming next. And I'm very excited. Thank you very much, John, for sharing my slides. And thank you very much for the attendees for listening to my presentation. I'll also put my details in the chat so that we can be able to follow up later. Thank you very much.
And Dr. Jones, thank you. Also, if you want to just remind me, and we go into the Q&A, there's a question about Northern Africa, if there's any hubs there. So if it's not, maybe we can address that in the Q&A at the end as well. Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's go over to Ian Bellina. Are you there? Let's go ahead and go into some of the projects and some of the types of things people invest in on digital assets and cryptocurrencies.
All right, yes, thank you, John. So hello, everybody. My name is Ian Bellina. I'm the founder and CEO of Token Metrics. We're a data-driven crypto investment research platform that helps crypto investors become smarter investors using data, analytics, and AI to invest in the space. I'm also the founder of a book called Crypto Investing Guide that's available on Amazon.com. We've sold over 12,000 copies in the last 2 months. And I'm based here in Austin, Texas, and also was born in Uganda, in Kampala. So some of you may know my story from online. I've been in crypto since 2016 as an investor, quit my job at IBM to go all in on crypto because I saw crypto as the biggest transfer of wealth in human history. And really for the first time seeing how anybody can really build generational wealth via crypto and the blockchain. So publicly people saw me via my open source free spreadsheet turn about 20,000 US dollars into $5 million in less than 1 year. And that is something that's very unheard of in other markets and other industries. But this is something that's widely available for anybody, even Africans. And that's why I think Africa is positioned to do well in crypto, because crypto is boundless, crypto is borderless, crypto is essentially building open finance for anybody to become a part of the next evolution of the internet. So for me, crypto allowed me to quit my job. I had a very nice job at IBM, was working there for 4 years, but I was dealing with basically office politics, right? Especially being a black person and being African in the corporate world, that's always a challenge. But crypto allowed me to have financial freedom to go out there and become an entrepreneur and do basically anything I love, right? And that would not have been there without the freedom and the power of crypto. That's why I think crypto is so powerful for anybody, whether you're African or whatever. Crypto lets you go out there and do whatever you want. So for me, I've been an entrepreneur for a while, but I was able to take my gains from crypto investing, and at that time about $2 million, and use that to launch what is now Token Metrics. Token Metrics recently just closed our last funding round. We've raised in total about $5 million at a valuation of over $80 million, right? But that would not have been possible initially without me being able to bankroll my own business, right? Because prior to that, as a college kid and with other ventures, I had tried going out there and talking to investors, and it's always been challenging, right? Especially because if you go and look at all the metrics for companies that receive funding, very few of them look like us, right? So with crypto, now we have the economic power to go out there and bankroll what we love, right? By making gains in crypto, we can use that to channel that back to Africa and Pan-Africa. And for me, I believe Africa is positioned well to do well in the fourth industrial revolution, because this is something that is borderless. And Africa has already been accustomed to mobile money with M-Pesa, right? And now as we evolve towards the next internet, I think people see Africa as the next frontier. And I think Africa definitely has to be involved in this, because with the other revolutions, it was very, very challenging. But now, by being early, we can get a leg up and be able to become a part of the crypto world, right? Because crypto, to me, is about disrupting finance and disrupting technology. What does that mean, right? Because legacy finance, all the different services, whether banking, investing, lending, borrowing, and others, those services have been known for having, let's say, challenges with Black people, African people, but now crypto is about disrupting all of that. where something is completely peer-to-peer, with no middleman, no person there controlling and having archaic rules, whether it's a credit system, right? So now anybody can go out there and borrow money with no credit check, right? And that's powerful for people who are trying to join the next evolution of technology and the next evolution of finance, right? So for me, I think that's why it's very vital that all of us become involved in blockchain and crypto. And the next internet, right? So I view crypto now as still being very early. Lots of people think right now it's very late to get into crypto. Maybe they missed the boat, but in my opinion, we're still very, very early. If you look just at America, less than 10% of the population owns crypto. And if you expand it to the whole world, less than 2% of the population owns crypto. So, and my belief is that crypto will become the largest asset class in history. It will surpass regular money, right? And other asset classes. But this is natural. Crypto is the evolution of currency and money online, right? It's only natural that analog methods of currency become digital. And the blockchain technology has been the best innovation since the internet itself, right? And when you start viewing everything as not just currency, but both currency and the next internet, and that currency powers the next internet, then you can see how powerful crypto can become, right? So how do you go about investing in crypto? First thing, as I would say, is start slow. Dip your toes in. Don't go out there and put in the mortgage or the rent money and possibly lose money, because crypto is still very risky. But with high risk comes high reward. So the way we basically educate our audience and customers at Token Metrics is to go through a framework for researching crypto assets. And that includes doing lots of due diligence on the projects. So the first element is doing fundamental analysis. What does that mean? That means going through the background of the team, their use case, their tokenomics, and making sure everything seems sound. And it's basically the first filtration for figuring out whether or not a project could possibly be a scam or not. And once we go through that, the next step of that research process is essentially doing a code review, going through and doing the actual technology. Now, this part is somewhat challenging if you aren't a developer. That's why our platform does this for our customers via newsletters and via research. And then the third part is basically going through and looking at the actual valuation. It's something undervalued. So basically, to sum up, it's fundamentals, technology, then valuation. And all of them basically help us figure out what projects are undervalued. And the reason why they tie together is because crypto, you have lots of projects that have great fundamentals but no tech. And you have lots of projects that have great tech, no fundamentals. And you have projects that have both but are overvalued, meaning that the price is likely to go down, even if it's a good project. Right? Because to make money in crypto as an investor, through my own experience, you have to find something great with great fundamentals, great technology that is undervalued. And I define undervalued as something that has the potential to do a 10x return, meaning that $1,000 turns into $10,000 in that investment. So once you combine all that, you can find those hidden gems investing in crypto. And my story, in essence, was done through that. Right? I worked in analytics at IBM, and when I got into crypto, a friend of mine from my college days back in DC said, "Hey, Ian, IBM's doing lots of stuff in the blockchain space with Hyperledger. Could you put me in touch with the director of blockchain at IBM?" And I said, "Why do you care so much about that?" And as he kind of basically took me down this rabbit hole of crypto, he told me, he was my age at the time, 27, black, launching a crypto hedge fund. And for me, that just baffled the mind, right? First of all, there were very few young people launching hedge funds, and very few of them were black. And to do one in crypto and Bitcoin, I just had to basically go down this rabbit hole. And the more I went down that rabbit hole, the more I fell in love with crypto. Ended up buying my first Bitcoin and my first Ethereum that very same week, because I began to see how disruptive this is, right? And I think this can be done for anybody out there. No matter where you are, I think crypto is something that is creating a world, a completely new internet where anybody can participate without having any central intermediaries or rent seekers. No governments, no banks, no archaic policies. This is now really creating an internet and a financial system of inclusion. So to kind of just wrap up, so I recommend if you want to get involved in crypto, to definitely go to our site, tokenmetrics.com. You can either join there as a customer or just click on our book. We do have an ebook version available for free for the crypto investing guide. It's basically our entire research team has gone through and put together a book that you can give to anybody who wants to get into crypto and have them become deadly as an investor in crypto. Right? It goes through, covers the basics from what is crypto, what is blockchain, how to invest in crypto, how to trade crypto, fundamental analysis, how to go through and evaluate technology, NFTs, DeFi, and basically all these different topics and chapters in the space that I think anybody who wants to get involved should know. I also do have a channel on YouTube where we post daily free videos. Let's go to youtube.com/tokenmetrics. And essentially we have live streams, we have videos, because for us it's about really creating education for anybody who wants to go out there and learn about the space and learn how to invest and trade in crypto. With that being said, feel free to contact me on Twitter. My handle is @diaryofamadman. And you can also email me, ian@tokenmetrics.com.
Thank you, Ian. We're going to go into the question and answer and discussion. So you guys can raise your hand in the reactions in Zoom. You can also type in the chat. We have some questions there. I'll start handing those out for people to answer. Ian, if you want to include your contact info in the chat so people can reach you as well, if you want to do that, that'd be great. The first question we have is from John Paul. He said, some entities are promoting fake cryptocurrencies on the web. It looks like Africans are more vulnerable due to less exposure and to good information. Are there any initiatives in Africa aimed in cryptocurrency education? So I will open that first. There's one that I am involved in, which is the Wakanda Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Meetup. So that information is in the chat. Let me go over to Ian, Dr. Jones, anyone else want to add in response to that question?
Yes, yeah, I'll take it. So, yeah, I think it's definitely something people have to be cautious of, and that's why having a great research framework to go through and be able to screen and filter out these scams using a proven method. So for us, it's really about using data and using projects, or going through and seeing what projects have been successful and what data points made them successful, right? Because yes, there are scams in the crypto space, but if you go through and have a very thorough process to screen them out, it becomes easier as an investor. And sometimes you can't do it by yourself, right? That's why having, because our entire platform is built on doing just that, helping people go through and filter out scams. Now, we can't guarantee investment returns, but what we try to do is to filter out projects that we know, this seems shady, this seems sketchy, right? And that can be done by going through the team's background, their track record. In crypto, most common scams either are one, Ponzi schemes, and Ponzi schemes can be figured out using basically their tokenomics, because typically they'll have what people refer to as Ponzi-nomics, right? So for example, they'll have a very high fully diluted valuation with a very low token supply that's given out to the community, with a large portion of the tokens, basically a majority or more than half, owned by insiders, right? Meaning that those insiders will dump on their community. So the ways to go through and filter out those kind of projects and have a better chance to make money in crypto.
Right. Dr. Jones or Deidre, did you want to add anything? I think you're on mute, Deidre. Anybody want to add any further on that?
Right, I think I'll go ahead. I think one of the other things that I'd like to add on to what Ian has said is the fact that this is a space that requires constant education, really. So infusing this within the mindset of citizens of the continent is very, very important. Not just giving data alone, but also hand-holding and creating an exposure, an environment where we are exposed to some of these tools and activities working in real time. That's so important. And the second thing is just to be able to provide an opportunity for those of us who are in the diaspora, who now have perhaps high exposure, to really take an active role on the continent in this space. This will really create a big leading example for the rest of us to follow. Thank you very much.
Deidre, were you commenting?
Yeah, I was going to say that on the African continent, you have, at least for people that want to get into the space as from a software engineering background, you have a Melanin Academy that is part of BitHub Africa out of Kenya. And as far as the average everyday person that's not very technical, Blacks in Bitcoin was one of the oldest blogs. It's blacksinbitcoin.com. Our group on Facebook, Black People in Cryptocurrency, but essentially, sometimes you can just use what you already know from previous experience. If something looks like a multi-level marketing scheme without crypto, it's going to look the same thing. Adding crypto to it doesn't make it less of a multi-level market. So if you hear code words like, you'll get a team and there's an upline and a downline or whatever, and you're not into multi-level marketing, you can basically pass on something that says it's related to crypto like that. So sometimes, and as Ian said before, what is written about the actual project? If they say they have a website, are they just repeating vocabulary that sounds like Bitcoin and not saying exactly what they're doing? They're just using a lot of big words and vocabulary, and they can't convey what does this project do and where can I see you doing it and what products have you actually produced or what's your roadmap to your first project. And don't be shy about saying, well, I'll wait until after the first roadmap is met because you said you're going to produce an app at this date. And they keep stalling. So despite the volume of marketers and people rah-rah and cheerleading, if they never meet any products and never meet any services, those are all red flags to avoid. So I think you can a lot of times use, if you're a true beginner, you can use those instincts to kind of pull away and start segregating. And then it's also the most conservative route as you're reading and as you're studying. Bitcoin is always like the safest thing to do micropayments. Don't think of it in terms of one Bitcoin is 60,000, 65,000, whatever it is. Like I have $25. How can I get $25 worth of $25 of disposable income? Not, you have to pay something with it. What can I get right now that has the lowest fees that is get $25 worth? Because that's my starting point. And then maybe a month later, maybe I'll do another 25 or something like that as I'm reading and studying and learning about the wider ecosystem, which is more than 15,000 projects at this point.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go over to, we have a hand raised, Nandifa. Said that correctly? Do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Good day. Thanks to the presenters. I think I wrote my questions, but I wanted to speak to the presentation that was done, the business intelligence one about the fin sector, and I wanted just to check what could be affecting the various in the Venn diagrams you have. For example, if you compare South Africa with Kenya, Kenya is becoming more grayer than South Africa, and South Africa is getting less into the banking and lending as compared to Nigeria and Kenya. What could be the contributing factor to that? And I'm asking this from the angle now going to the crypto thing and saying, what is your stand regarding the current tightening of taxation around the cryptocurrency? That's one. The second one is around the unscrupulous service providers. Unfortunately, this is one area that people fall victim. But the question I have, which is a consequence of the absence of education in this space. But my question then goes to the remedial action. For example, in the UK, you would find that there is an entity that deals with the regulation of the sector and closing down of unscrupulous. But that's not where my focus is how the reimbursement of the normal men on the street gets done so that they don't lose confidence on these platforms?
Okay, so I'm going to start and then I'll let our other panelists jump in to answer your question. Taxation is really from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I'm a trained lawyer. So in each jurisdiction, the taxation is going to be a question of where you are located, what is the taxing authority, where you're a citizen of, what country. And that's really like any investment, right? So if you're in a stock market in South Africa versus a stock market that's in Kenya, Japan, you're going to have the taxation depending on where you are located. Crypto is still evolving from a regulatory perspective, but it's no different in that respect. It's usually treated as property in many jurisdictions currently, by the way. From the unscrupulous service providers, I'll let others jump in to discuss this point. It is, as Ian had talked about, this is a brand new space, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of wealth is being created, a lot of Black wealth, I will say, a lot of African diaspora wealth, African wealth is being created. So there's a great opportunity, but the downside of that is there's going to be a lot of scams. There's going to be a lot of risk, because where there's a great reward, you're also going to have great risk, right? So if you go to a regular stock market, like in the US, right, where I'm from, in the States, if you go there, you might make 10, 15% in the stock market if it's doing pretty well, and that's it, which is great, but you're not going to build life-changing wealth from getting 10 or 15%. On the other hand, if you're investing in Bitcoin, you might be getting 250% every year. Like Ian said, that is life-changing money, right? That's money that allows you to bankroll. I've invested in my company, Ian's invested in his, a lot of other African diaspora, have done the same, et cetera. So there is more risk, but of course, because you have more rewards, you're going to have more potential risk. Does anybody on the panel like to jump in to address this?
I think I will jump in and address that, in particular also the comparison between South Africa and Kenya in particular. Of course, you've seen that South Africa has evolved very much closely related to the evolution from the Western world. So you find it's very closely linked to that, while the East African space is really more geared towards the disruptive nature of technology. In other words, we have skipped in East Africa, we have skipped a huge regulatory framework that perhaps was being evolved in South Africa in a very ad hoc manner. So we find that while the space looks a bit confusing, the fact that technology is coming to disrupt and create sort of ways in which, for example, we have the central banks really figuring out how do they interact with this new technology and new players. So this is something that we have in Africa, we have to evolve by ourselves. We cannot copy the Western world. We have to figure out ways in which we manage this. We've already seen, if you look at Nairobi, Central Bank has worked very closely with Safaricom to create some form of unique regulatory framework for the Kenyan space. And this has not been adopted from the Western world and so on. It's basically African minds, East African people themselves coming together and figuring out how do we solve this problem. And I believe the same also should apply to all other African countries, especially South Africa, working in this space. So it's very, very important to see that it has to be a bottom-up led activity, not just top-down alone. We have to see what is going on in the retail space, what is going on in the farming space, what is going on in the supply chain and the logistics, and how is the economy benefiting, and then perhaps building regulatory frameworks and taxation principles that are really effective. So I think that's what I would say that needs to be done on a wider scale on the African continent. And to do this has to be, of course, a lot of education, really. We have to have new startups in this space, in the space for education, whether it is economics, whether it is banking, whether it is in technology and so on. We need to see that coming up. Yeah.
And Dr. Jones, thank you. We have, I'm gonna do a quick lightning round because we're almost out of time, but we have a few more questions I want to address. So if we can just leave a quick, really snappy response. Dr. Jones, I think for you, what about North Africa was asked? Is there any hubs there for FinTech?
Right, North Africa is an interesting one. It's coming up very quickly, and we are seeing Egypt leading, Egypt, Tunisia, and Algeria. So we are seeing startups now beginning to grow in that space, and also investments flowing. So if you're interested in North Africa, watch those three countries very closely: Egypt, Tunisia, and Algeria.
Okay. And we have another one here: why people are reluctant to join the crypto market. I'll quickly indicate FUD. You may not have heard of that. It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There's a lot of that goes out in stories and articles and different news reports about this market. And I think that is one of the reasons that people are reluctant. I'm not sure, Ian or Deidre, would you like to make any other comment? Lightning round.
No comment.
I think I did it in the chat. I saw it in the chat. I don't know if you could hear me. I just responded to Sam and by saying that looking at sites like coinmarketcap.com are helpful for you to look at the different cryptocurrencies and see the buying and selling activity. Somebody asked if there was like an oversight agency to kind of determine, what is a good investment and what is not. The point is that you are that oversight agency. So do you have a value in a utility for, Bitcoin? Or do you have a value and utility in some other cryptocurrency that exists, or one that you need to create for maybe a church community, a religious community, or a social community that it would be valuable because you designed it to fit the needs of that specific, and then you made it fungible with Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of the other cryptocurrencies. So people have to realize that cryptocurrencies are built on what's called open source technology. So that means that the reason why there are so many cryptocurrencies, even with bad actors, there's a tremendous amount of good actors. The reason is because if you don't find a cryptocurrency has the dynamics, you can have a team of engineers actually design something and it fits with the rules of the pre-existing cryptocurrencies in terms of what are the standards that make it valuable. So if you can design something that what is called fungible, it fits the rules of something else, you can custom design your specific crypto to meet your specific community, and then say, well, the roadmap to my crypto is that you have to buy Bitcoin, and then based on Bitcoin, you can buy our cryptocurrency at maybe a fractional amount of that. So if you're confused, just look at the buying and selling activity. So, granted, some people are just buying to hold on to some of the more valuable coins, but other people are buying in. And there's these sites that report, this amount of Bitcoin was bought, and then that wallet sent it looks like they exchanged to this currency. So they're buying into projects being built in the space. And, fundamentally, like the leaders, our IBM, where Ian worked as well. But if you looked at, Microsoft is trying to foray in with Azure, and Amazon Web Services does a lot of things with Ethereum. If you look at the major brands and the major corporations, they're also dibbling and dabbling with building infrastructure on a lot of the pre-existing cryptocurrencies if they're not launching their own coins, such as JP Morgan and other banking institutions. So if you just want to just kind of study and look around and say, okay, what is this coin and who's building on it?